Last year saw a rise in legislative and regulatory attacks on the supplement industry. Should we be concerned things will continue or even worse, accelerate in 2023? So, some of you might remember that at the very end of my recent content regarding the revised FTC Health Products Guidance document, I stated that whether it was that particular regulatory update, state legislators attacking supplements, federal legislators calling for the supplement industry regulatory reform, or several questionable FDA moves against the supplement industry, it should be easy to see that the government is paying more attention to the supplement industry. I went on to say that this increased attention can only mean major changes are likely ahead. So, buckle up, supplement industry, things could get wild here in 2023. It was through some of the comments and direct messages that I received regarding that content, which made me realize that most of my audience was interested in learning more about what exactly is impacting the supplement industry from a legislative and regulatory standpoint. And while I could certainly provide an extensive update myself, this is a type of nuanced, trending subject matter that would undoubtedly benefit substantially from bringing on someone that's on the ground fighting these baseless proposals that would damage the supplement industry. That's why I asked my good friend Kyle Turk, who also happens to be the Director of Government Affairs for the Natural Products Association, to join me in an insightful conversation. Here's that discussion in its entirety. So, first off, Kyle, thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with me about the subject.
Yeah, happy to. Appreciate the time and looking forward to our discussion.
Perfect. So, at least from my perspective, a lot's been going on, and from like either the legislative standpoint or the regulatory standpoint. And I don't necessarily think this is like recency bias causing me to say this, but at least in my opinion, and I've been in the space for about 12 or so years, that this last like yearish, in terms of like the supplement industry, it's become kind of public enemy number one to a level that's really like unseen in recent history. And from my point of view as like a strategist, I see this as like there's a growing industry that's been given like a ton more exposure because of this like recent public health event that had really like everybody a bit preoccupied for good reason, obviously. And then now you have, if it's the congressional or the state lawmakers or the regulatory agencies, they're kind of looking at this as like they need to catch up. They got some things they now, from the supplement industry standpoint, that they probably want to kind of work on. And then you mix that with, a new Congress coming in, and changes are probably very likely. So reflecting on like the last year and maybe even looking ahead a little bit, is this like how you're seeing it, or are you kind of seeing it a little bit differently?
No, I think you nailed the nail on the head there. The last year has been really hectic at both the federal and state level for the industry. Talking about kind of whether it's CBD, M&M, NAC, mandatory product listing. There've been a ton of different issues that the industry has faced both at the state and federal level. I think broadly speaking, our industry has been put on notice when it comes to how lawmakers want to interact with us. I think when you look at places like California and New York, they're two prime examples where we've done our due diligence in providing evidence-based positions to lawmakers, and they've kind of straight up ignored us. Thankfully, in both places, we had governors that listened to the science and thankfully vetoed two really important pieces of legislation. But looking backwards and then obviously forwards, the industry as a whole needs to continue to stay involved from the policy perspective as well as the political perspective.
Now, you mentioned a little bit of the NMM kind of, dangerous precedent in terms of maybe how that's kind of being played out. But another, I guess, very recent thing that's kind of come up is the chatter around the CBD supplement petitions, and just kind of how a little bit of the, I guess, rhetoric coming out and saying like new framework needs to be kind of thought of. And this is again my opinion. This is obviously probably not yours or the way that you would word it, but in my perspective is that like as governments, they usually mean well, but when they do kind of look at things, they tend to mess things up more than they fix things, and this can really like snowball into a lot of different areas because I remember back in it was like 2019. This is the height, I guess, of the CBD era, and I was making content and talking about just that weird kind of regulatory purgatory state. And, how do you look at that from an FDA standpoint? Because are you going to go out on a limb and say X amount of CBD is allowed in food, beverage, and supplements? You probably don't want to get in that situation. So then it's put on Congress probably to make a decision. But again, that creates a lot of like woulda, coulda, shoulda, what could happen next. And again, going back to as a strategist, I always think about this saying of like, you want to, dance with the one you brought to the party type of a situation over like, thinking about something completely different. And I know that all this stuff is like, still ongoing or whatever, but it's just things that have been going on in my head. And I'm sure a lot of other people in the supplement industry are trying to figure out like, what the heck is going on?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think one point that you touched on is lawmakers do mean well. Unfortunately, though, when they go to change dietary supplement law, they aren't as immersed in it as they probably should. Two really good examples of that are on the energy drink bills that you're seeing at the state level, as well as bills that are restricting access to dietary supplements. But coming back to CBD, just the derelict of duty from the FDA on this issue is disgraceful. I think we've had 4 or 5 years of the FDA throwing up their hands saying they're not sure how to create a regulatory pathway for CBD as a dietary supplement, all the while letting up, I think the numbers right now is like 4,000 products on the market. It's confused consumers, it's confused industry stakeholders that are either looking to make products or sell products. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's killing innovation. I'm not on the industry side in the sense that, I make or sell products. But if I were, I could probably say to you, maybe I am looking at a CBD recovery product because of FDA's inaction on this. If I'm in that position, I'm probably not going to go and invest in the resources it would take to bring a recovery product with CB in it and bring that to market. It's just not feasible with the gray cloud that they've put over the industry when it comes to CBD. And from NPA's perspective, we're going to use every tool available to us to ensure that consumers have access to safe products and that manufacturers and suppliers have clear and concise rules that they can play by, including for CBD.
Now you mentioned a few times in terms of like on the state side, and I want to talk about or get a little bit more detail from you about kind of things that are going on with some of these state bills that are restricting or prohibiting access to supplements. I know you mentioned, if it's California and New York, I know there's some other ones, and maybe you can give a little bit more detail because people might not be, I guess, fully understanding from that perspective, like what's going on, especially if they don't live in maybe some of these states, or maybe they understand why those are as important as they can be.
Yeah, sure, happy to. And if you're watching this right now and you understood the ramifications that mandatory product listing had on the industry at the federal level, then this is an issue too that you'll understand is really bad for not just consumers, but people that are looking to bring innovative products to the market. Essentially, last year, what we had were 6 or 7 states that were looking to restrict access and prohibit access to dietary supplements, most notably in the sports nutrition sector, whether it was for products marketing, muscle building, or weight management. Unfortunately, though, a lot of times what we had seen were these just overbroad, over draconian pieces of legislation that were going to require you and I to, offer up our driver's license when we're at the cash register to ensure that we're over 18. Dietary supplements aren't alcohol or cigarettes, and that's how they were trying to regulate our products. And unfortunately, a lot of the talking points that we saw in places like California, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Missouri all led to lawmakers and advocates for these bills to say, yeah, supplements are just as bad, if not worse, than alcohol or tobacco, which is a dangerous thing to put out there into the universe. Um, I had the good fortune of testifying on all of those bills. Um, Unfortunately, there were a number of really misguided legislators that were under the assumption that our products cause eating disorders. Thankfully, that's not the case. There's really good data out there that the FDA houses that shows that there's no correlation to dietary supplement use and eating disorders. As I mentioned earlier, in New York and California, Governors Newsom and Kathy Hochul vetoed those proposals. And in the other states where they were brought up before either the Senate chamber or the House chamber, those bills did not pass. So luckily, we secured some really significant wins last year. But as we've seen time and time and again, these bills come back up. California, even though Governor Newsom vetoed the bill last year, they introduced an identical bill this session that we're going to have to spend this year and potentially next year beating. Essentially, in terms of the legislative process, it starts all over from square one. And then in New Jersey as well, a place that is home to a really big population for the natural products and dietary supplement industry. They're working through the legislative process right now on their own bill that would restrict and prohibit access. So the fight's not over, unfortunately, but through NPA's grassroots network, we've already had thousands of emails and phone calls into California, New Jersey this year, and last year we had about 20,000 health and wellness advocates call their legislators last year to let them know that these are really dangerous proposals for public health.
Now I know, each particular case is completely different, but is there any like patterns in the sense of who is, trying to, create these things in the state legislators to, get supplements to be restricted in certain ways? Is this something that's coming from, another industry, or is this coming from a consumer advocacy side? Like, where are these usually coming from?
So the predominant groups that are focused on supporting these pieces of legislation are Striped, which is out of the Harvard School of Public Health, and then the National Eating Disorder Group of America, or something along those lines. They're the two primary groups that have supported these bills. The funny thing in all of this that I think we need to focus on here, though, is every time that someone goes up and testifies in support of these bills, the examples that they're using for whatever product they think caused an eating disorder is an over-the-counter drug, which you and I know are totally different from dietary supplements. So I think what we've done a really good job of doing is getting groups to write their members of their state legislature saying, hey, one, there's no correlation between eating disorders and supplements. And two, everything that you keep bringing up to saying, oh, this product causes an eating disorder, well, that's an over-the-counter drug. That's totally regulated differently than supplements. Not to quote Star Wars, but these aren't the products you're looking for. So it can be frustrating at times, but as we've seen, when we do win, it's quite rewarding.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, that even from that level, like categorical definitions or just the understanding from the public and, not even necessarily from the consumer standpoint, but even some of these groups, they're not fully aware of what constitutes a supplement by, the definition, and then what is a over-the-counter drug, or, probably in some cases even, pharmaceutical types of things where they're grouping a lot of things together and not necessarily understanding that there are distinctions there. But to kind of like flip this over to, I guess, more on the positive side, are there also states that are doing a good job at attempting to, expand access to the dietary supplement market?
Yeah, there are, and just to kind of close off on some of the negatives and bring it full circle, this is why it's important for industry stakeholders. If you care about dietary supplements, you need to meet with your state and federal lawmakers. That's something that we provide at MPA. It's a great resource. If you own a business, you have to know and be on a first name basis with your state legislators. They're everywhere all the time. Invite them to your facilities, invite your member of Congress to your facilities. That helps bridge that educational gap that we're seeing with some of these pieces of legislation. Now, speaking to some of the positives that we've seen at the state level, it's funny, despite lawmakers proposing to restrict and prohibit access, there was a member of the state Senate that has recognized the importance of our industry and proposed making July 9th Creatine Day in New Jersey. Places like Kansas, Hawaii, and Connecticut have made proposals to either eliminate the state sales tax from purchases for dietary supplements or have included dietary supplements under what's eligible for purchase through supplemental nutrition programs. At the federal level, most commonly SNAP and WIC would be examples of those. And that's something that, with Congress, we've pushed on. We've had success in the past where we've had bills introduced, and we're continuing to have success at the state level where we're getting more and more people recognizing that, hey, it might just be a $12 bottle of vitamin B or D or whatever it might be, but that elimination of the state sales tax is encouraging people to continue to buy these products. I think there are 36 states now that exempt dietary supplements from the state sales tax. Last year, we were fortunate enough to have Kansas be added to that list, and I think we are of the belief that we can get to 50 in the near future, and that's the goal. So
I made a comment recently about a little bit of the silver lining of inflation, and now I'm a huge proponent of that. Inflation is one of the harshest taxes, even though they're not considered a technical tax, is one of those things that it hurts, the most vulnerable Americans. But if we're looking at a silver lining, is that the inflation has been really high towards at-home food or just food in general. And because of that, a lot of these states that had a grocery tax, which I think supplements are included within that, are re-looking at those taxes and saying, we shouldn't be having sales tax for grocery items. And that is starting to roll in and helping through this situation. And I know that it's hard to kind of look at the bright side or the silver lining for some of these things, but that's one that I thought was kind of interesting. And if we're talking about, the tax infrastructure or just the code as a whole, and there's that other element that's been, kind of talked about for decades, probably, maybe even before you and I were born, in the sense of like the health savings accounts and the flexible spending accounts and just how we can get supplements to be included within there. Is there some hope that any of like the recent bills or anything's going to actually get the proper amount of support from the federal level?
yeah, so last year we were fortunate enough to have Darren LaHood from Illinois and Brendan Boyle from Pennsylvania introduce bipartisan legislation that would allow dietary supplements to be purchased under or through an HSA or FSA. For those that don't know, it's a health savings account and a flexible spending account. Currently, right now, unfortunately, those products aren't eligible for purchase under those programs. We want to make sure that they are. During COVID, ironically enough, over-the-counter drugs were made eligible along with some other carve-outs that were made eligible under the FSA HSA program. So MPA and our members are working hard to ensure that in this Congress, this gets pushed over the finish line. We're fortunate enough to have members of the House Ways and Means Committee, being Mr. LaHood, sitting on that committee, which is the primary committee for jurisdiction for tax, which would be responsible for this. He's supportive of it. Mr. Boyle is also supportive of it. He's the ranking member on appropriations right now. And then we have a number of other critically important members of the House of Representatives sponsoring the bill as well. So there is significant bipartisan support for something like this. And we're looking forward to not just working on this issue, but seeing it across the finish line and getting this to be a place where if you have an HSA and you have dollars left over at the end of the year, you can go out and buy more zinc or iron or whatever your dietary supplement of choice might be.
Now, just before I kind of let you go, and again, I appreciate all the time, Kyle, is something that you kind of mentioned a few times, and I want to reiterate it because I think that the supplement industry and even if you go down to the niche of sports nutrition, I think because there's a long tail and there's a lot of just brand creation, and there's a lot of just, I would say, newer individuals coming into the space and entrepreneurs and really trying to understand how to be good players in the market and be somebody that actually is adding value to the overall industry. Because I say this a lot, is that if all the tides rise, all the boats along with it go kind of join it. And it's important to think about the industry as a whole, not necessarily just thinking about yourself in the competitive landscape. And it's important that note you said about actually knowing your congressman and from both the state level and from the federal level, and making sure that they are aware of who you are, and you are arguably a important part of their economy, that they are wanting to learn about you. And it's that opportunity, I guess, to extend an olive branch and make sure that they're aware of the industry as a whole, and just they can learn a bunch of things. Shouldn't be something that's scary. Shouldn't be something that you think, oh, just the biggest companies in the industry are going to handle. I think that it is something that everybody within the ecosystem should be thinking about this and figuring out, hey, how do we improve this? Because if what we're kind of mentioning, all the extra attention from the regulatory side and the legislative side, that change can create a huge amount of ripples that would ultimately hurt a lot of the smaller businesses. I know that that isn't always the intent, but I do think far and away when changes do happen, a lot of times it's the small businesses that get affected the most because they don't have the resources to be able to adjust quick enough, or maybe just to the level that they need to. So this is an important part of anybody within the industry to make sure that they are kind of paying attention to it, and then also playing an active role within helping it.
When it comes to the federal government and your U.S. senators and your House of Representatives, 55% of those members currently served at the state level, whether it's town council, county commissioner, or the state legislature. So when we get involved as an industry at those grassroots levels, whether it's a facility visit, a coffee with your state legislator, what have you, that sets the framework for the long game where, that person might move up within elected office. And they're going to have questions. There are going to be opportunities to get in front of them and allow yourself to be the expert on certain issues, whether it's business, healthcare, the list goes on and on. Specifically for the dietary supplement industry, though, if you already have that previous relationship and you live in California and your state legislator, they're going to call you up and say, hey, this bill came across my desk. What do you make of it? And if you're telling them, oh, it's not a big deal, and then a year and a half later, your sales go in the gutter because, you essentially have to put all your products behind the counter. They have to be kept in storage. You're IDing everyone from a grandmother to your next door neighbor because that's what the law now says. And then you go complain to that state legislator. It's like, well, you told me it wasn't that bad. They're going to rely on you for that expertise because, like it or not, state lawmakers and federal lawmakers can't be an expert on everything. So being able to be there and educate them on your business and how it impacts not just your employees or your colleagues, but the community at large is huge. And that's something that I'm proud that MPA does a really good job of engaging their members with their state lawmakers and federal lawmakers.
Well, Kyle, appreciate all the time that you gave me, insights that you provided my audience. Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks again for having me.
As you heard, lots of significant activity happening within the different layers of the government. But I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, hit the like button to support me. Also, help me get to my short term goal of 2,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that basically 3/4 of you that are watching this YouTube video right now are not subscribed to my channel, and that makes me extremely sad. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.